Many Hasidic holidays in the month of Kislev. The halacha is about the month of Nisan. The whole month of Nisan we don't say Tachnun because since the majority of the month has so many holidays, so halacha is to go by the majority. The majority of the holidays is a time you don't say the confessionary prayers. So the whole month becomes a yontif. I wonder if we would count all the Hasidic holidays of this month, if we would we discover that perhaps there are a majority of days that deserve to be celebrated. Either way, month of Kislev is called a Hasidic month. It's called a month of redemption. In that spirit, I want to learn this talk of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe addresses the meaning of Hasidus and how it relates to us, what it gives us, and let's go. It's all based on two parables the previous Rebbe gave about the meaning of Chassidus and difference between these parables, and let's go right to it. Previous Rebbe once gave a parable to explain what Chassidus is about, and these are the words of the previous Rebbe. Diamonds are found on the ocean floor. Coals, which give light and give warmth, are found deep in the earth. The usual order of how to discover the pearls or the coals is that you need someone who is going to give direction, where to dig and how to find them. The workers can rely on the wisdom of the one who is directing them. They can rely on his wisdom, but they have to follow his instructions perfectly. On the other hand, the analogy of the coals, they cannot, while they are deep within the earth, rely on the air that the director is breathing. Every worker has to himself connect to the spirit of life, the pure air that is on top of the soil, top of the ground. While they're deep within the ground, they have to somehow connect to the air on top of the ground, above the ground, and without connecting to that air, they could die without any spirit of life at all. So to a person who dives into the water, to find the diamonds, he has to breathe the air that is on top of the ground, above the ground. That's the words of the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe concluded, this parable is readily understood to everyone. Chassidus illuminates, Chassidus gives warmth, just like the coals. But you have to dig deep within the earth. You have to refine, you have to purify. And when you are deep within the earth, you have to remain attached above in order to live. Those are the words of the previous Rebbe, and now we're going to go to a talk of the Rebbe, where the Rebbe dissects these words and tells us what they mean. So just in brief, the parable is two parables: parable of finding coals, parable of finding diamonds. And although the Torah tells us that the previous Rebbe says that you have to follow the instructions of the one who's directing you, but you cannot let them breathe for you. You have to follow their instructions exactly. You can rely on their wisdom, but you have to connect somehow to the air above the ground, the air above the water. Without that air, you cannot survive. Okay, Ois base. Move on. Every detail of this parable fits like a glove to the analog, to the idea trying to present. But Tzachov, need to understand, Aleph, How come the Rebbe uses two parables? The parable of coals and the parable of diamonds. How come he's not satisfied with one parable? Base, although he starts off with the parable of the pearls, the main body of the parable, main body of his discussion is about the coals. In the analog, the Rebbe only discusses the coals. He says coals give light and warmth, and ignores the diamond, the pearls. How come when he gets back to the analog after leaving? First of all, the main body of the parable is about the coals. Second of all, when he gets back to the analog, he also only discusses the warmth and light of the coals and doesn't get into the diamonds and the pearls. Doesn't say what the analog of the pearls is. The question is, how come he starts off the pearls, discusses at length the idea of the coals, and gets back to only the coals, ignoring the pearls? What's going on? Perhaps you might want to say that the previous Rebbe concludes himself and says that everyone can understand this parable. So maybe he's relying on us to figure out the parable of the pearls. You can't answer that, because if he was relying on our understanding, then why is he explaining the analogy of the coals? He's not relying on us to figure it out. The fact that he focuses only on the only on the coals, not the pearls, tells us that the main thing we need to know about Chassidus is not that Chassidus is a pearl, but the main thing that we have to know about Chassidus is that it's a coal. That's what we get from the direction the previous Rebbe is going, the length of the parable, and the way he explains the parable in the analog. We have to focus on, yes, Chassidus is a pearl. What's more important for us to know is not that it's a pearl, but that it is a kol, as we shall see. Gimel, another question. Everything in Torah is precise. The connection between the coals and the earth and the pearls in the sea is not only because physically that's where you find pearls and that's where you find coals. And there must be some relationship between pearls and the ocean, and between coals and the earth. What is the inner bond between coals and the earth and between pearls in the ocean? Okay, so we're going way off now to talk about pearls and coals and the connection that they have. B'mohusam, the word mohus is made up of the words mahu, what is it? We're going to discover the inner meaning of what a pearl is, the inner meaning of what a coal is, and this will help us understand why pearls are found in the ocean and why coals are found deep in the earth. Chomarchai is thinking that the Rebbe is trying to inspire us to buy gifts for our wives. Okay, perhaps. Guys, Gimel. The difference between the earth and the ocean is discussed in several places in Chassidus. And we can understand the difference between them based on the kind of creatures that are produced from the earth versus the creatures that are produced from the ocean. The Talmud says that everything was created from the earth. Everything, every creature was created from the earth. Not only was it created from the earth, but everyone gets their energy from the earth. As the Torah says, the earth produces bread. So we get our life force from the earth. However, after a person is born, you don't see him as being attached to the earth. You don't see a connection between a person and earth in their lifetime. Fish are created from the water. It says in the Talmud that all sea creatures are created from the water, and that's why halacha is that if toivel be'eni shel dog, you're allowed to go to the mikveh in the eye of a fish in the water. It's not considered a chatzitz, not considered a separation, because the creatures of the ocean are considered like the ocean. You can't toivel in the eye of a fish outside the ocean, whatever. But the creatures of the ocean, when they leave the ocean, they die immediately. They have to always be found in the source of their life force. Both fish and earth creatures stem from and get their nourishment from where they came from. However, sea creatures need to be attached to their source. And creatures from the earth don't have to be attached to their source. They, in fact, you don't see any connection between the creatures from the earth and their life force. So the ocean, the sea, is a parable for those worlds in which the godly energy that creates, animates, and sustains shines openly. That's what the ocean is a parable for. The worlds in which the godly energy in those worlds that animates and sustains and creates them is revealed. It's apparent. It's obvious. You could see it. Creatures in those worlds constantly feel a need to be attached to the source of their life force, so they should be able to continue to exist. They feel the godly energy is what makes them tick, and therefore they feel a need to attach themselves and to be close to their godly energy. That's like the fish who always feel the need to be in the water. So too the angels and souls of these worlds, which are like the sea, they can visualize vividly their godly energy that animates them consistently, and therefore they gravitate to it and they feel they need it. And that's why those worlds are titled in Kabbalah the hidden worlds. Why are they called the hidden worlds? They're not called hidden worlds because we can't see them. They're called hidden worlds for a deeper reason. The identity of the creatures in those worlds, the souls and angels of those worlds, their identity is hidden. They're not hidden from our eyes. They're hidden from themselves. Just like fish in the sea, we don't see the fish, we see their source. And conceptually, the fish don't see their source, they don't see themselves either. Conceptually, the fish feel their source is what makes them tick all the time. So to the souls and angels of the worlds that feel the godly energy in them, their identity isn't noticed to them as much as the godly force that creates them. They feel more of the truth than they feel themselves. They feel more Hashem's reality and they feel their own reality. So having a title, the hidden worlds, means their worldliness, their thingness is hidden from them. What's apparent to them, what's obvious to them, is their godly energy. They don't feel themselves as an entity. You hear the word of Chol. They're hidden worlds. The fact that their worlds is hidden. What you see in them is the godliness. The world in them is not so noticed. It's kind of like the expression Chassidus uses, Chassidus says that there is a spectrum of understanding of godliness, and it begins with the lowest, which is what's apparent and obvious to us is the world, and Hashem's reality is something novel. Then there is a higher reality where the obvious thing is Hashem's reality, and the fact that we exist is something novel. The fact that there are creations is something novel. So there's a way that things are seen from our perspective, where our first reality is our Gashmis, a physical reality, and Hashem is something that is distant from our eyes, and we have to constantly reinforce our connection to Hashem. And then there is a higher reality where the obvious thing is Hashem, and the fact that we exist is something novel. Now, within this world itself, there can be people, and there are people who had their first reality is the Eibishter. I'll never forget, once I was in a shul in Melbourne, and these two little kids were talking about a voice they'd heard outside. One kid said, I heard a voice next to that bush, but I know it wasn't Hashem, because whatever, he had a reason why it wasn't Hashem. But his first reality is he hears a voice. Of course, it's Hashem. So that's someone who feels, a child feels, the first reality is, a voice. Where should a voice come from? Voice from a bush. Must be of the Eibishter. So that's how these creatures in the hidden worlds feel. They don't feel themselves as much as they feel the Gali energy that creates them. Luma is on the other hand, the analogy of the earth is for those worlds and those creatures that don't feel their godly source that creates them. They don't feel connection to the source that animates them. They feel themselves. That's what's open and revealed to themselves. Their own existence, their identity is their first reality. They feel separate. In the Hasidic lexicon, the biggest insult to give someone is a nifrat. You know what a nifrat is? Heard of a nifrat? Why am I looking at you? No, a nifrat means someone who is separate. Someone who's separate. Huh? That's a nifrat. A nifrat. He's just separate.
I thought
Chitzen.
Spitz Kabbat. I thought that's like the ultimate. That was in the paper this Shabbos.
Oh,
You feed Torah, but like not in full on the tip of a knife. This response to the Rebbe.
That's not Spitz Chabad, something else.
No, he said spitz on.
Yeah, but that's not Spitz Chabad.
No. Said the word. Spitz, something on a knife, on the tip of a knife.
Tip of a knife.
So, but it's shallow, right?
Ah.
So isn't Spitz Chabad where you're it's a shallow relationship to Chassidus?
Absolutely.
When you try to make the Hasidic Maimonim and tell them to your rabbi.
It's good. You're saying good stuff. Absolutely, we have to learn about that concept. We learned that Maimer. Anyways, getting back to our subject over here. So, the creatures of the earth. What are creatures of the earth? They're like the creatures of the earth are an analogy for things that don't feel their source. They feel separate from their source. Yes, we all created from the earth. We don't feel we come from the earth. So similarly, Hashem creates us, and we don't feel that godly energy. We feel our own identity first before we talk about Hashem creating us. That's our first reality.
Is it? I thought the coal that represents Panemius.
We get to the coals here. We're just talking about now where coals come from and where pearls come from.
The pearls are also
pearls come from the ocean.
Panemius is inside the coal, but the pearls come from the Panemius.
We didn't get there yet. So far, all we know is the location of the pearls, location of the coals. The difference between the coals and the pearls, so far, all we know is that the coals are in the earth, which the earth is something which is analogous to something that doesn't feel its source, and pearls are in the ocean, which represents those worlds which do feel their source more than they feel their own identity. This is the explanation of the two ideas in the analog, the coals in the earth and the pearls in the sea. The influence of Chassidus on a person's soul is divided into two areas. Chassidus inspires and affects the earthiness in a person, the revealed part of the person, the identity of the person. And Chassidus also touches the hidden parts of the person, the ocean, so to speak, in the person. So this touches both our earthiness and our oceanness. It affects both, which means this affects the way we feel as a person, as an identity, as who we naturally are inclined to believe we are. And this also touches those things inside of us which are hidden, which are deeper. Dalet. As has been mentioned, understand exactly what this means. We have to first explain why is it that Chassidus was given specifically to the last generations and not to previous and higher generations. Seemingly, the previous generations are more deserving of Chassidus than we are. So how come we were given this specifically? The answer is number one, the darkness of the exile, the darker it gets, requires a higher kind of light. In order to overcome a more difficult darkness, You need to have a higher kind of light. Therefore, the soul of Torah was revealed, which arouses and reveals our hidden strengths, which are hidden in of our neshama, the hidden parts of our neshama. Because the going has gotten tough, we have to get the tougher part of ourselves going. We have to get the deeper parts of ourselves going. In order to get the deeper parts of ourselves going, the inner energy that we have, how do we get in touch with our inner koiches, our pnim koiches pnimim, every person has koiches pnimim, inner strength. How do you get in touch with your inner strength? You have to learn the inner parts of the soul of Torah. By saying the soul of Torah, that touches and reveals your own soul. And you don't need that when everything is wonderful, everything is going well. When things are darker, then you need to have a higher kind of spiritual energy. The Rebbe, in a letter, writes about how a phenomena that only those Jews who were in touch with the learning of Chassidus in Soviet Russia were the ones who maintained their religious observance to some degree, everyone in their own level, but there was a stark difference between those who did study Chassidus and those who didn't, and the reason is because the Chassidus that they learned and they lived with touched a deeper part of their neshama and allowed them to overcome the overwhelming darkness of Soviet Russia. It was precisely their bond with their inner strength that they received from learning the inner dimension of Chassidus that allowed them to overcome that darkness. So here we're saying similarly, in history and time, that the time we're in, because it's darker, we need Chassidus to get the inner energy in ourselves. Beis, there's another reason why Chassidus was given to us specifically, not the previous generation. So the first reason is because of our deficiency, because of our lack, because of our neediness. There's a second reason why Chassidus was given to our generation. Because we are now at the end of the time of the exile. We need to prepare now for the future, the coming of Mashiach. You need to prepare for something. You need to prepare in sync to what is coming. The way you prepare for something has to do with what you're preparing for. So Hashem gave us a taste of what's going to happen when Mashiach will come. Chassidus is something from the future. Just like the Magen Avram and Alter Rebbe Paskin, that before Shabbos you taste from the foods of Shabbos, so too, before Mashiach comes, Hashem gives us a taste of the future. That's one of the meanings of the description of Alter Rebbe's Neshama. Alter Rebbe's Neshama is called a new soul. Simple meaning of a new soul is it's an unrecycled soul. All other souls, most of the souls are recycled. The Alter Rebbe had a new soul that never came to the world before. But another meaning of a new soul is that the Alter Rebbe's soul was from the future era of the coming Mashiach. The Alter Rebbe was from new souls that are going to be given to the world after Mashiach comes. He was a citizen of the future, so to speak. So why does Hashem give us Chassidus? He gave us Chassidus because we're about to get into the chasana of the coming Mashiach, and therefore we have to get dressed for the chasana. So Hashem gave us these diamonds. Hashem gave us these amazing revelations to get us ready for what's going to happen when Mashiach will come. Parenthetically, just to me, the you've probably heard about the world record Zoom that happened last week with the conference of Shluchim, International Conference of Shluchim. This week was virtual, and the Chassidim last Motzei Shabbos they began a Melave Malka, which never ended, and the Melave Malka beat the world record on Zoom for the longest meeting ever. The power of the meeting wasn't just that there are Hasidim in Australia and Hasidim in Hawaii and they got together. There's a lot of love over there. There's a lot of real love and bonding that made this meeting continue and made the inspiration continue. I share with you a story about Ramesha Feinstein, Ramesha Feinstein was invited to an event where many people had just recently immigrated from Russia, and he was invited to share some words of Torah inspiration to these new immigrants. Two Hasidim attended this as well, or just came out of Russia. And Ramesha notices them immediately, and he notices that they have beards. So he walks over to the first one, older chassid, and he asks the older chassid. His name was Chazak Chazliner. Chazak, how did you survive Russia? How did you make it through? So Chazak says, every Yontif, every Shabbos, we forbring together. We held on to each other. We spoke to each other. We inspired each other. That's how we did it. And he went over to the other chassid. How'd you do it? The other chassid was an even older chassid. By the time they ever Hashab, he looks at Moshe and says, Abrera migat. Did we have a choice? So there is something about the bond that Chassidus gives to Chassidim, to each other. The previous Rebbe writes that in the time of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, people would wish each other to love each other like Chassidim do. Chassidim had such a unique bond with each other that when people would get together at a family simcha, may God help us, we should love each other like Chassidim. So there's something unique about the bond with each other that we get through Chassidus, because Chassidus touches that deeper part of the neshama, and perhaps because, think about it, there's so many different ways people connect nowadays, and Zoom is one of the major tools that's used, and yet there hasn't been a Zoom that can rival, not just in quantity, amount of time, but in quality and depth and meaning and connection, like the Zoom of the Shulchan Farbrengen. How come there was a long Farbrengen? Throughout the week, I wasn't able to go on throughout the week, but throughout the week, everyone's telling me, you got to go on, you got to go on. Why you got to go on? Because there were such words of meaning, of people pulling out their hearts, of blessing, of inspiration, of crying and tears. It was not just in quantity, in quality. There was a real, where was it coming from? It's coming from this, what Chassidus gives us, this connection to our inner strength. And perhaps another point to think about, when the Rebbe says you need to have more light to overcome more darkness, one of the things that Chassidus gives us in the realm of more light isn't just that we are exposed to deeper parts of our neshama, but therewith, we're also able to achieve a higher level of Avos Yisrael, connection to each other, to lean on each other. As the Tzemach Tzedek famously was asked, Tzemach Tzedek was challenged by the Haskalah movement to basically attend the meeting. The government invited Tzemach Tzedek to debate various issues that the Haskalah movement was presenting to the government, and they wanted the government to sign off on. And they invited Tzemach Tzedek and a member of the Haskalah movement and another. And basically, one caveat of this meeting, Tzemach Tzedek was arrested so many times because he was so strong against the government, against the Haskalah movement, who were appointed by the government. So they asked Tzemach Tzedek, how do you have the gall to do this? Don't you know that what you're doing may cause you to die? He was arrested over 20 times. Tzemach Tzedek said two answers. Why isn't he afraid to die? Reason number one is, he said, there are his children. Reason number two, he says, Chassidim with their unity will be able to go till the coming of Mashiach. Number one, he has his children. There'll be a successor. Number two, the Chassidim themselves, with their unity, they'll be able to make it till the coming of Mashiach. So the Rebbe said that there was two answers at Tzemach Tzedek for two time periods. There's a time period of the Tzemach Tzedek, and there's a time period after the previous Rebbe's passing. He said after the previous Rebbe's passing, needs to be a focus on Chassidim bonding with each other. And this is something that we receive from Chassidus. It gives us the ability to reach within ourselves and to live in a higher level of Avos Yisrael. David, it's 7:46. If I let you go through your question, I'm going to get in trouble. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so I still want to know how Yishmael was Jewish, and because the Torah doesn't talk about a conversion process, I didn't hear a midrash about this.
Yishmael wasn't Jewish. Only Esav was Jewish.
Oh, okay.
Last class.
I read, but I didn't get the answer. So I thought that we said that because he was Abraham's, he was definitely not Jewish then.
Definitely not Jewish, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, have a great day, David. Get there, Beryl. Get there, Arya. Get them Chomorachai.
You too.